Hi, everyone. Thank you. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is
Hello.
Kirsty. I'm the founder and director of Swipe Right PR. We are the leading communications agency for esports and video games, and we look after some of the biggest brands in the industry, including Red Bull, PUBG Mobile, Faceit, and the fantastic Team Vitality. I am joined today by Nicholas, the CEO of Team Vitality, JMR, the CEO of OG, Michael, or also known as Carmack, the VP of Product Development at ESL, and Jonathan, the CEO and co-founder of Alliance. Welcome, gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about Valve's and their approach to esports products and whether that works for different stakeholders in the industry. I think what's important to note is that publishers hold a very unique and powerful position, and Valve's approach happens to be on one end of the spectrum with a very open ecosystem. So I think I'm going to direct my first question to Carmack. And I was looking at an interview that you ran with ESI back in 2018. For everyone watching, I think it's really important that you check out this interview, mostly because there is a fantastic rendition of Carmack saying "no doubt." Don't speak, but we're not here to talk about his fantastic karaoke skills, of course. So instead, I'd like to dive into your insight around the comment that you made. You said that the industry was going through a battle between two ideas of open competition preferred by companies like Valve and a closed ecosystem preferred by companies like Riot. So I'd like to figure out how that battle has progressed in your eyes.
Yeah, so before I answer, I'd like to clarify what I mean by open ecosystem, because that is often understood differently. There are two kinds of open. One kind of open is when any team can come in and compete. So that's the opposite, of a closed franchise league. And the other open is when tournament organizers can come in and deliver value to the ecosystem. When I say open, I usually mean both of those at the same time. So just to clarify what follows. I do believe we're still kind of in this stage where those ideas are kind of clashing, and we're beginning to see some of them pan out and some of them pan out less so. So, for example, just a little bit of data to start with. In 2020, Counter-Strike produced 19,000 hours of streaming to yield 354 million hours watched, whereas League of Legends did 12,000 streamed hours and did 580 million hours watched. Now, Riot paid for nearly everything. Valve paid for almost nothing of that. And if you adjust this for the fact that CS:GO has 24 million monthly players and League of Legends has over 115, well, then you can see that CS:GO relative to League of Legends is punching way above its weight, really punching way above its weight. At the same time, at almost zero expense by Valve. So clearly, Valve is doing something correct there. And you can see other examples. Overwatch League, I've got 3 CEOs with me. I wonder how many of them would want to try to buy a slot in the Overwatch League today. Maybe raise your hand if you're interested. LCS in North America, it's a closed league, closed ecosystem, and the team owners have asked for franchising, promising that they would be able to train talent better. Now they're asking to buy talent from anywhere just because success hasn't come. Just a number of examples, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Valorant is structured by Riot. It's going to be very, very telling. The differences between the LCS structure, the LEC structure, and the new Valorant structure, it's going to tell us a lot about what Riot themselves think they might have done wrong with LCS.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw my next question over to JMR, and I think one of the things that sort of stands out to me about OG was how you operated solely within Dota from 2015 to 2019, and then over to CS:GO. I know that you've expanded into Valorant, but I suppose Valve's approach, it must have worked for you as an organization to have been quite exclusive to their titles for so long. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, I would say that Valve has given us life. It allows us to be born, and I think Laura, Jonathan can also speak to that. Since the open ecosystem that they had, teams like Astralis, OG, NIP, to a point, Vitality, Alliance, Secret, we all had a chance to be born. If you compare that to what happened in League of Legends, many of these small companies at one point very early in their career had to go to get funding. The moment that they got funding to enter the ecosystem, they could no longer operate the way that they wanted to operate anymore, and they had to operate differently. Other KPIs became important, boards require other kind of things. So I think for us, Valve has created a way to create the companies that we wanted to have and operate the way that we felt passionate about, which is really the essence of Valve. Valve is a company who operates the way that they feel that they want to operate. And through fulfilling their happiness, they're able to provide wonderful products and wonderful games to other people. So for us, being able just to put a group of 5 guys together and go and compete, it was what started everything, you know? Then from that, yes, we won. It was a great story. And then we be able to get a little bit more sponsors, and then we get a little bit more money. And then the big milestone was we want to enter the other most prestigious esport was CSGO. I think there's also something tricky about what Michael said. It's just CSGO is so good that I think CSGO would have worked in any way, in any form, in every shape, because the game is just fantastic. I do believe that I think CSGO for me escalated to wonderful stratospheres where these new products that TO put together came into the market. That's when CSGO became what I think what it is right now. This is premium product. So for us in OG, it was a no-brainer, you know, that we wanted to be part of the best esport out there, being CSGO. And we're still fighting, you know, still an early project for us. But knowing that Valve was behind it was what gave us the passion, you know, to get into it.
Fantastic. And Jonathan, I can see you nodding there. So it'd be great to get your take on this, and having, you know, you have so many different titles that you operate in with Alliance. So it'd be good to understand sort of your view, or whether you feel, say, maybe Riot's models have sort of tipped the scales more towards a very different ecosystem that you're now more comfortable with. But yeah, which one right now seems to fit Alliance?
I mean, we're still in Dota 2, so I would say that the free ecosystem fits Alliance. But I do think JMR has a point in the sense that I think that many of the reasons why Dota is where it is today, and why some of these organizations, as Jay said, they started off as a team, that you were able to sign up with 5 guys and you were able to expand upon this. In a sense, you were able to achieve your dream. This is something I really support from a philosophical standpoint, that anyone can become good at this game. You could live in any country in the world and you could actually make it from the bottom all the way to TI and win. This dream, I feel, is, to me as an ex-competitor as well, has honestly a lot of value. But at the same time, I mean, I think that now I'm probably somewhere in between. I think that it's really amazing that we have the free ecosystem, but without a doubt, I see the positive impact that these leagues, or maybe they're not completely franchise leagues, Carmack, you can tell me what you call them, but these bigger leagues in CSGO, I think it is honestly what has catapulted the esports forward. And that's something I could for sure see value in bringing into Dota 2. And it's also something we're still working on. Well, yeah, we've tried and we haven't given up yet. So my political answer will be, somewhere in between. I think Valve has done so many things so well. I think that here they are trying it out with CSGO, and hopefully they will be a little bit inspired to do something similar for Dota 2. Same time, I do believe that Valve are very smart. They see the benefit of running 2 games a little bit different. You get a lot of different data from that. So, yeah.
Excellent. And Nico, I know you've been quite outspoken about your preferences in different ecosystems, and not just when it comes to like the Valve versus Riots of the world, but also Epic and Blizzard and everyone. And I suppose it would be great to understand from your point of view whether or not you see that Save and Say like Riot's model, whether that, because that's been developed over the years, because it becomes a little bit more stakeholder inclusive, whether that is now suiting Vitality.
Yeah, I think we should look at why the franchised or closed or semi-closed leagues are interesting from both the team and the publisher perspective. So I'm not saying here it's the superior model and the only one that could exist. I think we should understand why it's interesting in the first place. So from team perspective, first of all, you can invest for the long term and attract investor because you're not at risk of disappearing of the league. So your investment is secured. You can develop rookies and take risk. I think this part is super interesting because we used to be in the old LCS EU, so the League of Legends Championship in Europe, where you were every 6 months at risk of getting relegated. So in that context, you cannot take bets on rookies because one player that is not developing the right way and boom, you're out. So that's not good if you want to create that culture of developing young talent. So in a franchise or in a closed league, you can absolutely do that. Obviously, the revenue sharing that's associated with those leagues is key to create that sustainable ecosystem we're all looking for. So from a team perspective, there is a lot of appeal on those leagues. From the publisher also, first of all, you have full control over your product, the story you want to tell, the way you can present your game, the competition. So if you look at the league ecosystem, you have the regional leagues in the different countries in Europe. You have the LEC, LCS, the LPL. All of that is well organized within the Riot ecosystem, and it all culminates in the World Championship. I think it's great from product perspective, and you have full control as a publisher. Also, from a publisher perspective, in a closed league, you can just decide which team is joining your league. So you can unite the best brand. You can take the best Brazilian brand, 2 top European brand, 1 Japanese brand, whatever. You can compose the roster of team the way you want to, again, create what you think is the most appealing product. And you don't have team that is performing at one given moment, but that has no brand, no way of attracting partners, no infrastructure. So you're, in a way, you're choosing and selecting, and that creates a better product. And that, I would say, is the overall trend we see in the industry, but it's not black and white. Again, there are different models. You have fully closed league, fully open, semi-closed. So everything can exist. And what's interesting in a way is that in the most open ecosystem, CSGO, you see that ultimately what's happening with ESL, what we're doing together with Carmack, and what we're also doing, GMR and I, with our team in Blast, is going in the direction of those semi-closed leagues. So even in that model, this is the direction that the industry is taking. So again, I'm not saying it's black and white or we don't see change happening. And a lot of things can happen, but I'd still say it's the overall direction of the ecosystem. And from our perspective, it makes for a way better esport, and we can look into the future and hope of creating this sustainable ecosystem this way.
Perfect. And Carmack, I saw a little bit of a shake of your head there. Do you have a comment back for Nicholas? Oh, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Apologies, tried to be polite there. Nicholas said that it's a franchise closed league is a better product, but I don't think a league where there's absolutely zero threat for the teams at the bottom. I don't find it appealing myself. Call me a traditionalist, call me orthodox.
No, I call you a European. Because that happens in the NBA, and no one is concerned about competitive integrity. So I agree that it's 2 different cultural models, and I see your point. And frankly, it's a debate that we can have at every panel, and there is no answer to that. Some people would think NBA model is an appealing product. I don't think the lack of relegation is a threat to the competitiveness, but I understand your point, and it's the culture we have in Europe with football.
And at the same time, I also completely understand. And if I were the CEO of a gaming team, I'd also say that I would love to have stability for my team, because that makes things very predictable and it removes very random, sometimes ups and downs. A player gets a girlfriend and suddenly the team just spirals down and you're losing millions, literally. But at the same time, I'd say that, and you see it in North America, if you have a franchise league on top of literally nothing, then you have big problems. They have really big problems delivering talent upwards to their league. In Europe, the LEC stands on top of a network of European country leagues, and they draw talent from there. In North America, it just doesn't work because you can't just take the NBA, which stands on top of the NCAA, which has a very robust college system feeding it players. You can't just copy the NBA and say, fantastic, it's done, right? So, but I do agree with Nicholas that you can't categorically say this is the objectively best system, this is the objectively worst system. There's no such thing. You can see clearly League of Legends is enjoying enormous success with its esports. I just think it's not punching up to its weight class. But that's obviously an opinion. We can debate it for days and days and days.
I was hoping to strike a bit of a debate at least. So yeah, good. That's good. Yes, go for it, please.
I would say that maybe I'm just too much of an OG fanboy, but we can't say that this creates the best stories because the best story in esports is OG winning TI8. It's a team that was rank 18, went to open qualifiers, went to win it. This could have not happened in any other esport like that. So we can't have that story with a guy that never played a professional game in his life.
I also don't like the idea that to say that, hey, these 10 companies, these 10 CEOs, they have the monopoly for being the smartest in the entire ecosystem with no ability to challenge them from below and new people coming in. I do believe, honestly, and I've been on the receiving end of competition driving innovation and improvement. Competition is good. Simple as that. Again, not trying to paint a black and white picture there. It's not black and white, but obviously it's fairly clear where I stand.
Yeah. But on that point, okay, now go.
Go on, Jonathan. I'm going to throw Jonathan.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that. I mean, I'm probably a little bit in between here, but I kind of agree with JMR in a sense. I agree that to me, and this is probably from where I come from in esports, I do really believe there's something beautiful in competition when anyone can make it. Then again, I don't think it has to be as open as Dota 2, for example. I do think that potentially if the LEC could have some kind of way for teams to qualify, I really personally believe that would be the most interesting. But at the same time, I see the benefits of having brands that people can recognize, that you can cheer for a long time. What happens in Dota 2 every now and then, even though there's actually a fairly stable amount of teams in Dota as well, even though the system is open. But every now and then you do have these teams that come, they take some attention, they disappear, and it creates some... I wouldn't say it adds that much value in the long run. So I'm probably going to say I hope for a world where it's a little bit in between.
I was going to support Nico because, Nico, I think that you're right with everything that you said. That's why I think that I'm a big, strong advocate for what you guys are building and what we're building together in CSGO. Because we have those two stories. We have the core teams that are always there, that drive the product, that can bring the sponsorships, that can bring the value, but any of the other teams that qualified could do a run for the title, Like, we have that beautiful story that allows both of them.
Yeah, I agree that maybe what we're doing in CS altogether might be the best of both worlds. But I think there is still a bit of not a misconception, but the idea of 5 people sticking together, creating a team and getting to World Championship, given the level of professionalization in esports, will anyway be less and less credible, and we'll see that less and less. What happened, for example, in League of Legends with Origin is a great story. The stories in Dota are incredible. But at the end of the day, when you look at what it takes now to win, it takes way more than just individual talent. It takes cohesive practice team, coach, infrastructure, and so on. And that will be more and more the case. So those stories anyway, we'll see less of those. And what you keep in the closed system is still any top talent on an individual level will reach the top, the same way a young athlete will reach NBA if he has the right level. For that, however, you need the right infrastructure and regional leagues or minor leagues, as Carmack said. This is super important below the franchise level, and you need to build on top of something that makes sense to spot the talent and nurture it to the top.
So what
And,
about what
Graham-
happened? Sorry, Christy. Sorry, I
No,
promise.
go on.
Last
You
thing.
want one last comment, and then I'm going to move on.
Okay.
I'm going to move the questions
So
on.
what happened in Overwatch? There was a team called Rogue that was destroying everybody for months, and then the franchise started, and these 6 players were sold to different players and became, many of them, uninterested and uninteresting separated, but together they were extremely interesting. This French roster with the French culture, with the way that they played. I think that, me personally, I believe that as an executive, I do not make competitive decisions inside my company. And sometimes by having those execs making those decisions, we do not cater to what really the best talent is. We're catering to what we believe the best talent is. But maybe it's the wrong people identifying the talent, you know?
So I'm gonna touching on your point around talent, and actually each of you have identified different responsibilities for different publishers, and I think that's incredibly important, because I think one of the topics of conversation is what is the role of a publisher here? Shouldn't it be just to make a great game and then sort of leave the actual competitive side of this down to the tournament organizers, down to the team? So in your opinion, where do we need to draw the line with the role of the publisher? Carmack, I'll throw to you.
The role of the publisher is to be as hands-on as they need to be. And let me rephrase that a little bit. It's to do as little as they can get away with while delivering a good enough platform for third parties to come in and generate value and stimulate competition at the same time, plus regulate a little bit. In Counter-Strike, if Counter-Strike is example of simulating competition in Counter-Strike was the majors. Valve came around and said, okay, well, the best, most appealing offer for a CSGO major will get our support, will get our promotion, will get initially $250,000 in prizes, and that stimulated competition between tournament organizers to a very large degree. And you have to credit Valve for doing that and generating so much progress in the Counter-Strike ecosystem. At the same time, I'll say that any game that has a fan base, that has viewership, will end up being successful so long as people are given the tools to make it work. I mean, let's rewind esports 20 years back. It was growing. It was growing constantly and very quickly with absolutely zero support from publishers. So I'd say the publisher just needs to be as hands-on as they need to be, period. And not an hour extra of work spent on esports, actually.
Any other comments on the role of publisher? Jonathan, maybe?
I mean, I just wanted to say a quick comment there, where I do believe that CSGO and Dota 2 are quite unique in the space of games. They kind of grew from the community themselves, and the games were alive before Valve bought them or took them over. I think they've done a great job there, but I also think that it's a little bit different, maybe the approach you can take to the game if you've created it from scratch, created a community from the scratch in a sense, towards compared to an existing community, which I do believe that CS 1.6 and Dota 1 had to some extent.
Yep. And Nicholas?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, Carmack, you are happy with the way Valve operate, because it makes it has helped ESL to get to what it is today. So it makes a lot of sense. But it's certainly not the only solution. And to your question, Kirsty, there is no correct answer. But what I want to state is that it requires expertise to build a league or a tournament, create an event, tell a story, and ESL is a good example of that. They do all of that very well. And Valve is saying, I let other experts do that. And that makes sense. But on the other hand, you can be a publisher and say, I will do it myself. But that doesn't work if you don't take the time to build, to get the experts to do so. And it takes a lot of time. So the Riot approach of doing everything by yourself only works if you're committed to put a lot of time, resource, energy, investment to make it work. You cannot just do it half-assed and say, yeah, I will organize great events, because it requires a lot of things. So I think both Valve and Riot approach make a lot of sense. Riot says, I will put a ton of money to hire the best person to create a fantastic product and fantastic events, and obviously it worked. On the other hand, Valve says, I will let excellent companies do that work and battle themselves to be the winner of that space, and that's fine also. What probably doesn't work if you are a publisher and say, I will do everything by myself, but you don't have the resource and expertise, and that can be a disaster when you're in the middle like that.
Can
Jamal?
I add something? I think that sometimes it's hard to really put all these things together without really analyzing the audience and the game itself. Because when we talk about League of Legends, CSGO, and Dota, we can all high-five each other because the games are fantastic and the audience and the product drive itself. But when somebody has tried to replicate the Riot model without this fantastic game, they have burned to pieces. So I believe that ESL has been, for example, successful launching games that maybe didn't have the thrive and the audience, and they've been able to make fantastic tournaments, while other ecosystems that they have closed from the beginning without having the player base had end up awfully. So yes, kudos to Riot for making League of Legends work. So maybe I'm actually not on board of closed ecosystems. I'm just on board with League of Legends closed ecosystem, because the game is fantastic. The rest haven't worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense, and I think the thing that stands out to me when I think about the CS:GO ecosystem is I can see pinnacle events like IEM, and I can understand sort of the value of having that bigger open ecosystem. But I can also see the drawbacks when it comes to community management, when it comes to how things are communicated with players and teams and fans. And surely when there is a problem and you don't have that open chain of communication, that can be a bit of a barrier, and that must affect your brand. Carmack, I don't know if there's ever been a problem with one of your tournaments and you've had to fall on your sword because Valve hasn't been available to comment. Like, surely that's a lot of responsibility, and that must have a knock-on effect for ESL.
Well, you obviously want, if you're talking about bugs, you obviously want bugs to not exist in the game, and the way we deal with it is we patch it up with rules. If there's an exploitable bug, we just write a rule that you're not allowed to exploit it, and we have a kind of a soft way, paper way of patching that bug ourselves. When it comes to publishers and working with publishers, it's, from my personal experience, it's not really terrible. It's extremely rare that something goes so terribly wrong, and it's the publisher's fault. Rewind the clock 15 years or 10 years, and you had server patches in the middle of the tournament. When publishers basically didn't really care that much about esports.
It still happens right now. It still happens.
Yeah,
in Dota,
it still happens
in the middle of the
Dota
tournament,
too.
before the finals, 2 hours before the finals.
Not in my experience. We have a different set of experiences, which is fine. But it's absolutely on the publisher to make sure that the game is clean and good for competition and ready for competition. But when it comes to we don't like throwing anyone under the bus, and a lot of the time in the heat of the moment, across my 20-year esports history, I've had moments where what appeared to be a bug was actually our fault, and sometimes it did appear to be an actual bug that got in the way, and sometimes it was a third party like an ISP routing problem directly to the servers of a specific game. So throwing anyone under the bus in the heat of the moment is never a good thing. But yeah, I'm not sure what the publisher has to do with this. I mean, for over a decade, esports has been going on with practically zero publisher involvement. It was just fine. Everybody was able to deal with it. I don't necessarily think that it is now the publisher's role to step in every time there's a bug to explain anything. I think it's unnecessary.
Okay, and from a team perspective, for CS:GO majors, different tournament organisers tend to pitch for different majors. And that results in different production levels of production, terms as well. Like, how does that affect your organization? Not necessarily always 100% knowing what you're going to walk into for your players, where they're going to train, where they're going to be able to practice. Like, how does that affect you going into a game? Jonathan, do you want to start?
I mean, I think that in most cases, it's honestly positive. I think that competition usually brings better things. You know, if you're having one tournament organizer hosting an amazing event and then another tournament organizer tops that event, usually the first one will do an even better one, right? So I think that generally I don't think it's a bad thing. Of course, every now and then you will have one bad egg, so to speak, but overall I don't see it as such a negative thing. At the same time, I do agree to a certain extent that, of course, you want to have predictability. You want to know exactly what's going on. And yeah, I mean, there are many things that Riot are doing that I am jealous of. And there are many things that Dota 2 are doing that I think are great. So I will once again find myself somewhere in between, not step on any toes. But I do want to say quickly, I do think that something that these franchise leagues do bring is storylines. I think that content around the leagues and content around the game and building these storylines around the players, it's something that I think Riot and their franchise league, they're doing incredibly well. And that is enough for me to be a little bit intrigued if this would be interesting for Dota 2 as well.
Fantastic. JMR?
I'm going to give you an exclusive. I am the CEO of OG, and I'm going to tell you how I find out about news about Dota. Through Twitter, like everybody else. I have no ability to plan anything that happens in my calendar. Nothing. I just go to Twitter. They normally write it on NA time because they are in Seattle. And that's how I find out how my calendar and my next year of my life is going to be. I'm okay if they don't want to ask me. Of course not. They're great doing this. But can you at least let me know where I don't have to fly through COVID somebody with 3 days in advance or things like that? Or we're planning, we don't have anything ready. We have been putting our leagues together. We have something going with ESL, something going with WePlay. Valve goes to Twitter and lets me know how the rest of the 6 months of my life are going to be. Ta-da.
I really hope someone from Valve is watching just to hear that message.
No, but they know. We
Very
have a lot of
message.
conversations with them. We have friendly conversations, and it's always like, well, we're trying to give you the information as soon as we know. We're trying not to just appeal to any of the stakeholders. Why OG? If we tell it to OG, we can tell it to everybody. I was like, okay. And they were like, well, if we're going to tell it to everybody, then why not put it on Twitter? I'm like, there is a reason for it. So we can help you communicate, so we can do content, so we can hype your tournaments, you know? So we can get the players so you can have the highest level of competition. So we want to give them the best product.
I completely understand where you're coming from a commerce point of view. Nico?
Yeah, it's fun that you said that, because I was going to say that those are really problem we had in the past in esports, where you had dozens of tournaments. From Vitality perspective, we started in Call of Duty, and at the time, as Carmack mentioned, no publisher support. So it's only community-driven event, and then it become companies that make those events. But still, you have 3 world championship every year by competing companies. You have a dozen of tournaments. No one from the fan understand anything, and that was really created a lot of problem, because you didn't really know what were the relevant events, the logistic. You have a very different level of production of infrastructure for those tournament organizers. So it was really a mess. And I was going to say that those are problems of the past, especially scheduling the year and so on. But apparently in Dota, it's still the case. But in other games, when it's publisher-driven, or when you have a high level of consolidation, like you see in CSGO, now we're in a good place in that sense that we can schedule way ahead. We know, and the audience know, what are the key events in a year. In a year of CSGO, it's super clear. Obviously, the Major is the best title, but you have the the huge ESL events, Katowice, Cologne, that brings that history, and those are key. Everyone identifies correctly those events. Now you have the blast final that are coming in the ecosystem, but you have a clear year where everyone understands what matters, and it used not to be the case at all when, as you said, you have so many different tournaments. It was hard to understand and plan and operate in those environments. So I'm happy that we're out of that, and I hope that in Dota it will get better.
We're constantly on call.
I think this is, when it comes to the publisher and managing the ecosystem where with third parties involved, I think Valve in Counter-Strike, as Jonathan mentioned, it's slightly different between Counter-Strike and Dota, the approaches. Valve in Counter-Strike approaches it like I approach my kids when they argue with each other. I just sit there, don't do anything, and wait for them to figure it out. Because if they need me to figure the simplest thing out, then they need me every time. And then all I do is sit through their squabbles, listen to them, and try to arbitrate. I think Valve is actually trusting the ecosystem in Counter-Strike to be adults and figure it out. And we've got things like ESIC coming up, the Esports Integrity Coalition, that bans players, and now it's industry-wide respected. These bans are respected industry-wide. We have in between tournament organizers best efforts to schedule events in a way where we don't get into in each other's way. Obviously, that isn't always frictionless, but it begins to work. And to Nicolas' point, it's getting better and better, and it's more and more predictable. And it happened practically with no involvement from the publisher.
In Dota, they are full on.
I'm going to throw to some audience questions in a second, but I wanted to very quickly ask, I suppose, just taking a look at sort of how like the traditional sports model, and obviously no one owns basketball, and I appreciate that esports is a very different, completely unique entity. But is there anything that we can ever learn from sports, a model that might work, or a model that we could mold into something similar to how sports operates? Jonathan, maybe we'll start with you.
I think that for me, I mean, for sure, but I do think there are some things that we should take from sports. I think there are some things that are better left not touched at all. But honestly, I don't have a great answer to that one. I think that we're just going to have to wait and see a little bit. I think that Valve themselves have probably not reached the final decision on how they're going to run their games. Maybe they're happy with having two different models. So yeah, sorry, I won't have a clear answer to that. I'm a little bit wary of traditional sports because everything tends to get very controlled by the ones owning the rights, etc. And I guess I'm a little bit used to have a little bit more free reign since I'm been active in Dota myself, and we have a team in Dota. But I'll repeat myself once more and say balance in all things. Maybe there's a middle ground where we can have a somewhat closed system, but there's still a potential for people to break into the top.
Any comments on the?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing to look at is that, again, in sport, you see various models coexist the same way as in esport. The open model of European football, obviously great success, huge audience, huge impact, and the NBA model works very well, and everything that can exist in between. But this being said, there is one area where the NBA and the closed model are clearly superior, is the cost control. Because in football, what happens is that you have a huge inflation on media rights, so that's a ton of money pumped into the ecosystem, but that money just goes away to the players. It's great that players get a huge share of the revenue in the ecosystem. They are the one creating the value, creating the show on the field, so that's fine. But in football, it's obviously not sustainable, and that doesn't work. Everyone's losing money here, so that's not a good system. Whereas in the NBA, NBA is happy and making a ton of money, teams are happy and making a ton of money, and players are happy and making a ton of money. And the debate then is what percentage of the share are players getting versus team, and it's a balance, and sometimes they fight, sometimes you see a lockout, but ultimately everyone's very happy in that ecosystem. That is clearly missing in the European football, where teams are losing a ton of money. So for one thing, what we could try to replicate is at least trying to get the good ways of operating of the American League and trying to control the cost to make sure it's sustainable for the 10, 20 years to come.
Excellent. Chema?
I would say that it's about time that traditional sports start copying esports models and not the other way around, because they are unwatchable. I think that, yes, we talk about the NBA like he's the
Boring.
pinnacle. But what about everything else? How about the age of hockey is going up higher every year? How about baseball that no one watches it? I think that right now these leagues that we have in esports and these formats and this open market and these thrilling stories that we have that play globally are way more interesting than what they're doing in traditional sports. So I constantly hate having to compare ourselves to them, because we have the audiences, we have the attention, and in all honesty, there is a reason for it. And how dynamic this environment is very attractive to people. It brings a lot of communities that are not represented in two other ones. Nico, you say that the NBA is great. It's fantastic, but if you're not one of the 24 teams, then where are you? You cannot play
But I
basketball.
agree. That's the binary reality of a closed ecosystem. You're in and you're super happy when the product is so powerful, and you're out and you can just watch, and you're not part of the party. Agree. That's what comes with the closed ecosystem. Yeah, but we might overall think that it creates something great to tell the right story. But again, I'm not here to settle this debate, and I fully agree with you. If you're left out of the party, it's certainly not good.
Well,
I'm going
I'd
to jump
say-
very quickly. Go on, Carmack.
just really quickly, I don't think esports has gone out net positive from copying from sports. Just as an example, the round robin. Do you know why round robin was invented in the first place? Like for leagues, for football leagues in Europe? The original first competition in England was the FA Cup, which was a large single elimination bracket. But that was over 100 years ago, 120 years ago, or something like that. They created the round robin league system in order to maximize the revenue potential, and the only revenue was ticket sales. And now it's this in tradition, it's decades and decades, you can't really get away from that, change that. But it's in the digital age of globalization, where somebody in China can watch you, and in Brazil and in Australia and in Europe. Like a middle of October league game on Saturday afternoon is not a must-see thing, and certainly not in the NBA when every team plays 72 games. So the original reason why leagues were created, meaning ticket sales, actually doesn't carry over to sports, but it was carried over, and suddenly we go, oh, amazing LCS. No, it's not. It's boring.
Yeah, but I think
I
that's
do have
another
to throw
different
very
format.
quickly to a.
But
I'm going to throw quickly to an audience question, just because we've got 3 minutes left. I'm sorry.
we'll have this debate again, Carmack, and another panel. Anyway.
We need more time. So one audience question, wouldn't a closed competition at this point mean a giant issue or disadvantage for countries who are still in full development in esports? Nicholas, because I interrupted you, please, you take it away.
That's fair, and that goes with what Gemma was saying. Again, there is not, when you have 10 or 12 or 15 slots, there is not room for everyone. And if the publisher is selecting teams that fit the idea of getting the most exposure to the product, they certainly won't maybe get a team from a smaller country. So that's a fair point. So again, there are clear drawbacks to that structure, and you have to accept and weigh the pros and cons. So certainly that is one of them. At the same time, what we'll see is that the talent from those teams on an individual level will find its way to the teams, but those teams would not carry the flag of the country. So that might be a problem. What we see in League, though, is they really succeeded in building the ecosystem from a country perspective, supporting the pan-European league. So in a way, you get the best of both worlds. And currently, there is the EU Masters running, which is kind of the UEFA Cup. So it's not the Champions League, but it's the European competition with every country representative. And that, when Riot announced it, I had a lot of doubts. But at the end of the day, people are tuning in to watch and support their countries, even if it's not the highest level. So maybe, again, Riot found a good formula here because everyone can feel represented. but admittedly not at the LEC level. Sure.
Thank you. Jamal?
I would say that for me, the best country competition that I've seen was Overwatch League, the World Cup. I thought it was a fantastic product. I think that what Nico said is, again, I'm just going to hammer the same thing again. If you're in the party, it feels very warm and cozy. If you're outside of the party, it pretty sucks because you want to be part of the party. I obviously like parties where I'm inside. And if getting inside the party means always fundraising, we have to understand that we're putting an entry barrier to people and to countries and to business models and to cultures that might not be able to pay it, or that they choose not to pay it. And I tend to not like having a price tag to enter. It's not like John said before, it's philosophically not what I support. I like the idea that, for example, in Dota, a team from Peru just finished first in groups, That's awesome. Because all of us now have to watch ourselves and say, oh, dude, they're doing something really good there. Let me see how they're playing, And if I got those players and I put them in my system, they would not play like they were playing. They would play like I play. So there's something cool and unique about now we all have to figure out how they're playing.
Yeah.
Go on, Jonathan.
Yeah, I just want to say that I do think that this is really true. And I think that what's going on in esports today is that we don't have the answers. Even the people that are working with performance, we don't have the exact answer on how to play, how to become a pro player. It's not a formula you can copy from traditional sports. This is also why I think that you have these ginormous organizations with millions of dollars, but they just don't have teams that are performing. And this is why I think esports is still in a little bit of a unique place where I think it benefits to grow all the regions of the world in a sense. At the same time, of course, there's always going to be the same thing there, right? Everyone can't be invited to the table, but as many as possible is the best for me. Because as Jay said, what happened at the most recent Dota 2 major, a Peruvian team that everyone has counted out, that weren't even supposed to be invited to the groups, they destroyed everyone, including my team, including China, regions that have been completely dominating previously. It sucks and it's shocking for me to hear, but at the same time, it makes me a little bit happy that they can come here and show us that you don't know everything. Yeah.
Thank you. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for. I'm being told to wrap it up. So I want to thank our fantastic speakers. You've made my job incredibly easy. I barely have to say anything, so thank you. And to everyone watching at home or wherever you are, thank you for joining in today.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you, guys.